All right, man. So we are square in January 2025. We have California is burning. Our prime minister has just resigned. Um, Nothing else is going on in the world.
That's it, right? It's just what happens here in North America. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little easy, obviously, to get centered on our stuff because I don't know. I mean, with me in the feed, you can get just bombarded with just, oh, that's all that's happening. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's so funny, and I remember years ago, this pre social media, talking to somebody who was from Zimbabwe, and my dad has somebody, a colleague of his, actually a classmate of his, when he went to chiropractic college, who practices in Zimbabwe, and I was talking to a South African about. He was talking to me about some of the stuff politically that was happening in Zimbabwe, and how they were blowing up pipelines on the side of the road, these gas lines on the side of the road. And there's these like massive fires that were, everywhere, and people were dying, and all kinds of stuff that was happening. I was like, oh my God, it's nuts. And yet we didn't hear of any of it over here. Like, I had no idea. He told me about it, and I remember looking it up online. And this is like 2001, 2002. So this is like, it seems like early internet back then.
Yeah.
It's like prehistoric internet. But I remember
Yeah.
looking it up and like, oh yeah, like this is actually happening. But yet we never heard of it. And it's funny how there's so much going on in the world, and we hear a lot more of a lot of what's happening, but there's just so much. There's so much. It's like there's too much.
Yeah, like it is. I was thinking about that as you're sharing this. Like, I've had some conversations with the developer in the Ukraine, and I've had another one with the developer in Brazil, like just in the last week. Like, if you had a conversation with anybody from some other country, like they've got just as much stuff going on there as we have here. It's just like it would be an overwhelming for us to try and tune into the amount of stuff happening in each, in each place, and not even just each country, or like at each municipality, like just the stuff that's been going on in the Ukraine, like it's still going on, right? Like this gentleman I was talking to, like it's sad. Like he's got friends serving in the military there who are dying still in the ongoing battle with Russia, and he doesn't know. Like they don't know what. Like they kind of do, but they don't really know why they're at war. Do you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
that's awful, and just the stuff that my friend's been sharing with me in Brazil that's been going on, like with their president, like just super corrupt and like, anyways, if you go back in the history, it's not, it's a lot. I won't say it's too much. It's just it's a lot.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that happens too, I know what happens for me. I'll just speak for myself, is that people will try to pull me into whatever conflict or whatever agenda or whatever thing is super important that day, and make a judgment on me if I don't get involved.
Right.
And I'm like, well, like, listen, there's so much to be involved in. Like, I just got to be involved in my own life. Just like, the thing that's the most important that I should be involved in is like the life of my kids, the life of my business, the life of my family, and that's it. And to make a judgment on where and how somebody spends their time, energy, and money, I mean, just because there's, the cause du jour is going on, it's like you can't get sucked into that.
Yeah, especially because
And
like you don't really know, right? Like it takes a lot to like actually get into someone's world, to get into their experience, to get into their understanding. Like I just find too, like it's easy to make a quick judgment on things from the headline or surface article that we've read, or even if you've tried to go down the rabbit hole. But like, do I really know? No, like I don't know what's going on in these places. I don't know what's going on in certain people's heads in terms of why they're causing some of this shit. Like it's just, but to get really involved, you'd have to like get involved. You'd have to like go there. You'd have to like know the people. Like otherwise we're just having these surface level conversations of opinions to try and what justify our own bias in the world. I don't know,
yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
yeah,
But it brings me back to our friend Chad that we had on the podcast here a few episodes ago. He's talked a lot about the importance of small community. and I think about, just knowing where he comes from and how they live. And I also think about just some recent stuff I've learned about Japan, where some of my ancestors are from. It used to be these small villages of like 300 people. And these
Mm-hmm.
villages now in Japan are abandoned. Everyone's kind of moved into these big urban centers thinking that's where life's at. And yet these beautiful rural villages are now abandoned. But what happens is, what can happen is we move more into these urban centers, as we take in more of what's happening in the world. It's easy to get desensitized to things, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
lose this empathetic connection that we inherently have with each other. And someone was sharing this example of this like, little vignette on YouTube where this guy goes out to get pizza and someone gets like really hurt on the street beside him and he just kind of looks at it and just keeps going by, gets his pizza, goes back, still the person's still there, goes home, and then like watching something and it's like trying to emulate empathy, but doesn't actually feel it anymore.
Mm.
Like you can just get, I think, and you can go, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of psychology behind this. You can just, unfortunately, if this is the stuff that you see on your feed and all this horrific stuff, and you live in this big center and it's just a lot, like I think there is, unfortunately, a mechanism that could come into play to just start to, like a coping mechanism could be to just start to numb to it, to start to make it normal, and to lose that ability to empathize and to connect with people.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Are you familiar with Dunbar's number? You ever heard of that?
No.
So Dunbar's number says there's like suggested that there's like a cognitive limit to the amount of people that we can really maintain stable social relationships with. So I think it's something about somewhere between 150 and 250 people, something like that.
Okay.
Anything
Yeah.
above that, it's like you can't hold it in your brain. And
Hmm.
so when there's like so many people, it just becomes untenable. And so, yeah, so you start to disassociate and you start to see it as not real life because like we're not necessarily, our neurology isn't necessarily meant or hasn't developed to be able to hold that many people, to hold that many relationships, to hold that many ideas at one time. And so,
Yeah.
so there's a bunch of scientific research on it. And so it's, they call it Dunbar's number. So essentially like the size of your tribe
Right.
that you can kind of hold is, yeah, it's relatively small compared to, you might like, I know like on Facebook, like I have 5,000 friends, quote unquote
Right.
friends,
Sure.
Facebook,
Sure.
most of which I've never met. And granted, the algorithm has it so that I see the people that I interact with the most,
Hmm.
which is great. But there's also, yeah, there's random stuff that I'll see about some people's lives. And I'm like, man, like I don't even know this person,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
tough to hold it all together.
Well, yeah, and we think about this is not what we wanted to talk about, but when we think about just even my own neighborhood here, like the way it's constructed, like like I wonder what the population of West Vancouver is, right? Like it's thousands, and the way it's constructed is, the community center is supposed to support quite a lot of people, and so we're not even really set up in that way that we could easily connect with 150, 200 people as a little village, because you could construct it where there's smaller community centers and it's easier to connect with your own village and your own community and your own neighborhood. Like I kind of know my neighbors, but I know them a lot better, I think, than some areas and some people, but I still know them like super well. But I'll put a plug in for, yeah, if anyone wants to move to rural Japan. Apparently there's these beautiful 200, 300 person villages that are just completely abandoned that you could populate.
Do you know but what's happening in Japan? Like I'd heard, and this is I'm just maybe just remembering it. So I don't know if this is true. Maybe you know if it's true or not. Like that you can't own land there or can't buy property there unless you are Japanese. And that's kind of one of the
I
issues that they were having with their kind of population, not growth,
decline.
but decline. And
I
some of
don't know.
their, yeah.
I don't know the rules around actual ownership, but I was there this spring and I was looking at properties with someone who lives there, either a young, well, he's the same age as me almost. I think of him as young because I grew up with him here in Vancouver. But
Hey, you're still young. Come on.
yeah,
Jeez,
he's
you're too
like
young, man.
3 years younger. But I still remember when we were like kids and he was my brother's friend, Anyways, he's almost the same age as me now. But he grew up here in Vancouver, North Vancouver, and then lives there for the last 20 years. Anyways, he was sending me, and I was just showing our friend Kevin these properties, like these beautiful houses in Japan for like in just outside the big centers. Like one of them was like an hour outside of Kyoto, and it was like this, like I don't know, it's probably an acre, maybe not quite, maybe like half an acre with a beautiful house and garden and everything for like 300,000 US. And then you could
Wow.
go a little bit further out, and it was like 60,000 US. But I don't know the rules around actually owning, like if it got like a 100-year lease or something. But I don't know. I'd be really curious to look into it further because house prices around here are ridiculous. And if you could live in an incredibly beautiful country that's super safe, that's clean, that's respectful, and do your work remotely, I don't know. It seems like a pretty amazing option to me.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. The other day, I was watching. I was seeing this vignette of photos, and people were comparing home prices and homes, like what the home value is here versus somewhere a bunch of other places in the world. And it was like, for 1 point, the average home price here is, I think it's up to 1.3 million or something like that,
At
1.4.
least, yeah.
And so for 1.4 here, it's like a tear down. And it's a 3 bedroom, was built over 100 years ago, and it's essentially a tear down. And then there was like a castle outside of Marseille in France, and
Right.
it's like on 4 acres of land, and this giant castle. And like, oh my gosh, it's nuts.
What we pay here. Yeah. I'll share one more thing on this topic because again, we're talking about family, and I saw this amazing video that showed up in my feed about a story here in Vancouver, and the headline was four generations, four houses, one lot.
Oh
And
yeah, I saw you
so,
said that. I saw you post that. That was amazing. Looked really
yeah,
cool. Yeah, tell me more.
yeah. It just I loved the concept where the I guess it would be sort of the kids are like our age, and so the parents, I guess in this generational system, so the grandparents had bought this lot, kind of like you were describing, many many years ago, and it had just a single like rancher home on it, like 1 story, and in pretty big lots here in Vancouver, even though they're not huge, but they are fairly big for what you probably need. And so they realized that as housing prices increased here, it was becoming harder and harder for the kids to actually own a home, right? And to be able to have somewhere that they could call a home. And
Hmm.
so they did a few things that were brilliant. One is they applied to be able to subdivide the lot into four lots
Hmm.
on a single lot. And so what ends up happening is they were able to get four more, like they could, so there's four houses, four lots with driveways, parking a car, you can park four cars, and now there's four separate mortgages. So their kids, and they built these homes and very creatively architected, the inside of them, the outside of them to maximize light and storage and all this kind of stuff. But long story short is now the kids could afford to buy, this house on a 1/4 of this lot, and they now have on this lot the great grandmother, who's deaf, living there, and now gets to see her great grandkids all the time because they're running in and out and keeping her excited about life and stuff. And then the grandparents have one home, and then there's a family of two kids and a third on the way with one of the larger homes, and then one of the kids with I don't think they had kids with one of the smaller homes, but just to be able to have a family together, but still have their own boundaries and walls and stuff like that. And then be able to afford to do that here in Vancouver. I thought it was brilliant.
That's so cool. I mean, I think for me, it would be my dream to do something like that, regardless of the economics of it. Like that would
Hmm.
be the best. I always had a dream of having me and my family and all of my friends like all live on the same street. Like we'd buy all the houses on the street and just kind of like have like a little compound where we would all live there together.
Yeah, that's what they called it too, the family compound. I mean, yeah, I have such fond memories of playing street hockey as a kid. Being able to gather up all the kids and being able to have enough kids to have a full-on street hockey game. Um, and then the other funny irony about this video as I was watching it is the grandparents in the video. The grandmother was very vocal. She was really great at showing everybody what they'd done and why they'd done it. And the grandfather in the video, he was a little quieter, but he's an architect, and I was like, wait, I know that guy. And one of my very first jobs coming out of university, I worked for an engineering company, and he was one of the architects at this engineering company, John Higgins. So I emailed him because in the video they actually put his email. I emailed him and just congratulated him for this brilliant design and concept. And yeah, he's if anyone wants to learn more and like wants to get the plans from them, he's very keen to share. As you can see in the video there, I will post a link to it. They were just very excited to share what they'd done for their family, and I just thought I love the idea for sure to be able to keep, yeah, as you say, keep your family together, create this little community of your own, and then just to me, that's the start of being able to ripple change out into the world, right? Because you've got all these mega lots beside them. But now you've got this beautiful idea that's now disrupted the way people might think about, family and system and community and stuff like that. So I just love that. And from there, I mean, the change has already rippled out. I've already sent that video to like, five different people.
That's so cool. Yeah, I remember being when we were, my wife and I went for a honeymoon in Bali in Indonesia. Like seeing, like walking around the towns that we were in, and I guess, yeah, you've been to Bali too. Like seeing that, like all these little homes that, like these little properties that people have, that there's multiple generations that live in the same house, and that, yeah, they all and not only do they have like their little house that they all like multi generations live in, but they also have like a little temple inside their house, or like a little place where they have their offerings and do their praying and stuff like that. And so it becomes like this little community in and of itself, within itself, within kind of the walls of a home. And yeah, like there's so many cultures around the world that there's like, that's just the way they do it. There's multiple generations of people are living together. And I think there's something so beautiful about that.
Yeah.
There's something brilliant. And I'm it's interesting. I'm curious as we get so wrapped into this world with technology and being able to, like I say, like granted, we live in the same city, we're 10 minutes apart, yet we meet online, and there's part of this that is, yeah, like it's like I'm looking at you through a teleprompter, so I feel like I'm looking in your eye. Granted, you're this big in front of me, and it makes it seem like we're in the same place. But how different it is when we're actually in the same place. Like it's very, very, very different. And it kind of, so as we have this technology, it gives us this illusion that we can be apart, but still be together. Yeah. And so we move further and further apart. And like I said, I have a brother who lives around here. My parents live hours away. I have another brother who lives even further away. My sister who lives even further away in Atlanta, Georgia. And she's 3 time zones away, and that's all fine. And I wonder, the more and more that we get like that as a culture, I wonder if there'll be more of a push to kind of come back together. That kind of connection, whether it be because of economics or whether it be because of whatever it is. I'm curious if there'll be kind of we'll come back to that at some point. I hope so. I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I mean, you're right. My family, we're all here at least very close. We were able to get together quite easy. Yeah, my parents are 20 minutes away. My brother's 25 minutes away. Some of my uncles are 30 minutes away. But at least, for New Year's, it was fairly easy to bring us all together physically. And we haven't done that in a while since like COVID. And but there's something really special about that, to be able to get together physically. And I wonder if some of this desensitization, as we're talking about, is we feel this need or this want to kind of separate from each other more. But if we were in smaller community, if we had better experiences growing up, would we want to stay closer together, as a family unit perhaps, and have things ripple out from there? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you think way back in the day, I mean, people kind of stuck to their communities and kind of stuck close to where they live and where they grew up and stuff like that. And I think there's something beautiful about that. And like we were going to talk about today, and this might be a good segue, like taking our kids, taking our families away from our own little communities to see the rest of the world and see other places and see other cultures, to see other societies, to see other ways that people live and interact with each other is such a gift. Like it just really broadens the mind. So it's like this dichotomy of, like having everything local and small knit, like the kind of whole concept and principle of the Dunbar's number seems so amazing. And on the flip side, the more that we broaden our horizons, the more that we see how other people live, the more that we see other cultures, I think the more empathy, the more compassion, the more understanding that our kids can get, and the more worldly they are, I think the better suited they are to be great human beings, because they're not so myopic on like, this is my life and this is my little community and this is how I live and that's all that there is.
Yeah. Right. Like we started off the show, right? That North America is the world. That was my experience growing up. I think that's why it's been really important for me to take my kids out of this bubble. Because I had a pretty thick bubble around me, not without realizing it, until like probably 24 years old. And then I had my bubble burst, big time. And like I hadn't left North America, and it's kind of like,
This is when you went to Malta you're talking about?
yeah.
Okay.
And I make fun of myself a little bit, like the Lego movie. You know, where the guy's in the Lego movie, and have you seen that? Have you seen the original one, like the first one?
Yeah.
And he's like, he's doing everything he thinks he's supposed to do. Like he's all nice to his neighbor. Hey buddy, and he's going to get a coffee for everybody. He's just like the super nice guy doing life and doing this, whatever he does when he wakes up in the morning. But then you get kicked off the path, right, and realize that like, oh, there's a lot more to life than just, my little bubble, right? And so that was this opportunity that one of my mentors gave me to move to Malta, at 24 years old. And I had no idea where that country even was. And I didn't even really look it up back then, right? Because that was 22 years ago. So I don't even think I Googled it. I don't think I looked it up. I just had in my brain that, it's this island in the Mediterranean. It's going to be like what I know of the Caribbean. It's going to have these white sandy beaches and,
Yeah.
No, it's the tip of a mountain. It's total rock. There's like very little soft space there. And my bubble burst. Like that country, I had to learn how to drive stick on the other side of the road. I had to do a job I'd never done before. So I took a training course on the way there. I stopped in London and had like a 7-day training course, maybe a 5-day training course on airports and airport development. And then I land on the island as the only guy from Canada. And like just my whole world, gets flipped upside down. And that ended up being one of the best opportunities and experiences of my entire life. So I just have always wanted for my kids to have their bubble burst of reality of the world, so that it's not just this little, bubble much earlier. And in a healthy way and a supportive way, but also so that they do, like you said, appreciate what else is out there, and not from a place of like, oh, the grass is greener, we got to go here, we got to go there, but like more so like an appreciation of like, oh, cool, look at how people live here, and look at how people live here. And I think, what we've done, I think a great job of is like, and I'm super excited to go back to my life here in Vancouver. Like we've got some great friends and family and things that we love and everything, and really make sure that you're, it doesn't have to be that way. Like maybe you realize that like, oh, life where we are wasn't that great. Maybe we should move. But I think it's important to have that sort of anchoring with gratitude, so that you do really appreciate where you are, and really appreciate that, so that you're not always thinking about, how much life could be better somewhere else and grass is greener.
Yeah, it's very similar to just recently. We went through the holidays. I went through Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff. And it's even before that, like for people in the States, they had Thanksgiving that kind of led into Christmas, that led into New Year's, and people seem so excited, like, oh, finally, like the holidays are here. And then when the holidays are here, after a little bit, it's like they can't wait until regular life starts up again, so they get back to their routines. Like I can't tell you how many people I've seen this week in my office my chiropractic practice, who they're like so relieved, like, oh, finally the kids are gone back to school and they can get back to their routines. And so funny, it's like, yeah, like we were so excited about this, the holidays coming, then you're so excited to just go back to what you were doing before. And while you're in it, it seems like, oh God, like, oh, I just need a break. I just need a break from my routine. But as soon as you get a break from your routine, you just crave your routine again.
That's funny. Yeah, the pendulum, you can swing it pretty hard. Yeah. Anyways, I was gonna go on a rant about that, but we've had this topic in front of us here now for several weeks, and I think we're just about going to be able to talk about this. Some of our favorite travel stories with our kids.
But before we talk about that, right? No, I'm kidding.
Let's talk about life and how to set it up so that you don't feel like you need to go on a vacation, then you don't feel like you need to get back to your routine. Like, why don't you just set up life where it's more balanced, where it's like, oh, I don't need to go on vacation. My life's, I don't want a vacation from my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone had given me the analogy, and I'm kind of butchering it, but he had talked about the difference between, say, even our language, how we speak about it, the vacation versus holiday. The connotation of vacation, to vacate, like you're vacating your life, whereas a holiday, the connotation is holy day, so it's sacred. So it's like you're not doing something just to get rid of your regular life and to go into something totally different, but you're just creating a sacredness to an experience of your kind of in your regular life.
Oh yeah.
I was like, great. I was kind of hold on, like, so I always tried my best, and I'm sure I don't follow it all the time, but whenever I'm conscious of it, to whenever we go somewhere for a trip or something like that with our family or for leisure or anything really, like try to call it a holiday and not a vacation.
Nice. I like that. I'll definitely use that. Yeah, like so not trying to escape, but going for a different reason. We're going, again, I don't like to create my life where it's like, oh, it's so stressful that I need to vacate it, right? It's like, no, my life, I feel like I've done a great job of creating it very balanced and being able to provide that for my kids. And there's holidays, there's holy times within that life, even here where I don't have to vacate it, creating time and space for downtime and rest and rejuvenation. And like I was telling you, going to that spa, the cold hot plunge place last night, like that's for me, a great way to just de-stress, detoxify, connect with other people, and do that within the experience of life here rather than having to go somewhere else to do that. But that also, yeah, the idea of that holy day, that's a great segue into finally being able to talk about this with one of the trips that you mentioned. Yes, one of the trips that you mentioned was you guys had gone to Bali. So there's a phenomenal holy day in Bali. And I'm going to butcher it. If I remember correctly, it was Nyepe. I think that's what it was called. It's one day on the calendar every year where the entire island shuts down, like even the airport. This is like a very busy airport, right? Like I've come in that there's 3-hour lineups of people and tourists coming into Bali, but the entire country, there's no one on the streets there. So, and you're supposed to, you don't go on, you don't talk to even, you don't even talk to people. It's like a whole day of like decompression and silence and like quiet and stillness. And it was like the coolest experience, and also kind of like the freakiest a little bit. Like me, I didn't totally, like I shut down and I experienced it, but I also went out on the street because I was curious to be like, what was it like? Because normally there's just scooters going by like crazy on the street that we were on.
Yeah, it's nuts over
so
there.
I went on the street. Yeah, I have a video, and it was just like nothing. And even like we were in this, we went from one bubble kind of to another one there, but we were in this little gated section. So there's like 5 houses and a security guard. The security guard was fast asleep, and like just the entire island was just, it was like this eerie calm over it. And it was fascinating to see what happened. Like our kids, I have a picture of all 3 of them just conked out in the middle of the day within this quietness. It was like almost like everyone's systems just took a breath and whatever you want to call it, regulated themselves, and like just the kids just passed out. And it was like the coolest experience.
So I've just looked it up here. So it's called Nyepi, Nyepi.
Okay.
So it's a Balinese Hindu holiday that's also known as the Day of Silence. And so, yes, interesting. The entire island shuts down for 24 hours with no lights, music,
Right.
or noise. The airport, tourist attractions, shops, restaurants, and ATMs are closed. There are no cars on the streets except for ambulances.
I
People are
mean, to set that
required to
up,
stay at home and are not allowed to leave their accommodations or make any noise. Oh my God.
well, I left, but yeah, and that island is normally super noisy, right? Just the amount of construction and like chanting and drums and scooters, like it's such a contrast.
Wow. That is so neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I should resurrect the video I did of like the before and after, like the scooters, and then I'll have to find that. Yeah. But yeah, that was a phenomenal life experience because I don't like to also be a tourist. I don't like to because then you kind of get this like outside view when you go to places, right? Like I like to be in the place that we go. Like I like to live there. So, I guess that was probably with my experience, moving to Malta, where I actually got to live life as a local there, and how much different that was to actually experience the history, experience the people, learn the customs and stuff like that. And I would see the contrast to the people that would come there and party from the UK or whatever and drink it up, and it was like, yeah, but you don't know the place, like so anyways, I think from that experience I really took away from it, like wanting to live in the places that we go on holidays to.
That's really cool. It's really cool. And how long were you guys there for?
So yeah, you know, there have been times where we can move very quickly, and I can put things together quite quickly. So we were there 6 months, and it came as an idea at a Tony Robbins event, which a lot of things have happened thanks to him, and it's not necessarily thanks to him, but it's thanks to that environment where you take yourself out of life and you really start to think about what's important. I think that's ultimately what, one of the big things. I mean, I've been at 12 of his events, but now doing my own self retreats, like I did this over this past New Year's, I think I got some of the same kind of big takeaways and ahas just by taking myself out of my normal day-to-day life and giving myself a few hours to do some thinking, some guided questioning, and a self retreat. But obviously with Tony, you're in a energy rich environment, and he's asking you some really tough questions, and you're working on it with other people. Anyways, at that event came the idea of creating far more adventure in our family life that upcoming year. And so I proposed that idea to my wife that, hey, what would it be like to have a super fun adventure filled year? Are you up for it? And she said, yeah. So I actually surprised her. She didn't know where we were going to go. She didn't want to know, and I created it as a surprise.
Oh wow,
And I
that's so
and
cool.
so in well, the full story is okay. So the full story. This isn't part of the whole thing here, but the full story was I wanted to. This is a bit of a story, but she she had a I don't know if she would be comfortable with me sharing this, but she had I won't share the whole story then. There was a reason why she stopped teaching yoga here in Vancouver, even though she had started one of the biggest yoga studios that we've had in Canada, Y Yoga. But she had a reason to stop teaching, which wasn't great and not in her control. So I wanted to create an opportunity for her to teach again in a safe place. So as one part of the surprise is I organized a yoga retreat at
Oh yes, I remember that. Yeah.
this phenomenal venue. So at Tony Robbins' event, I met oh shoot, Praj. I met Praj, and his family owned this incredible resort up in the mountains of Bali. And I've never been there before, but he showed me this picture of the rice fields and this. It's on this mountainside, and it's even got this like 45-degree elevator. It was just like this thing out of like a storybook. And I was like, "You own this place?" He's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "So if I organize like a yoga retreat, could we put it on at your event?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, we've got this great spot and blah blah blah." So I was like, "Okay." So the wheels start turning. I meet a yoga teacher at the event as well, and I was like, "Okay, this is happening." So I organized a yoga retreat as a surprise to my wife that kickstarted the whole trip, and we had I don't know probably in total 10 people flying there, including teachers, to come to this yoga retreat, which I've never organized before. And it turned out to be just, I don't know, my experience phenomenal at this resort. She got a chance to teach again there. And then from that kickstarted. We brought our kids, so they were at a phase of life that I think is important. That it was easy for them to pull them out of school, and they weren't super entrenched in their activities that they're all in on right now. So that we could do that for 6 months. I wouldn't do this now because it would just be they wouldn't it wouldn't be supportive to them, and they wouldn't want to in terms of what they've got going on in their life. But it was a perfect phase for where they were at. It was probably my eldest was probably like 9, and the youngest was 1. So, but yeah, that we kickstarted off with the yoga retreat, and then after that week-long trip, now we're into the mode of like, okay, but where are we going to live? So we started as we were there, starting to do the research of where we were going to live and how to find a place. And we did find a place that was not ideal that we moved into, but we quickly moved out of that place and found a really good spot in Canggu. And the property and the rent was very reasonable compared to here, and it came with a membership to this like private fitness club there that had a dance studio. So my daughter ended up doing dance 3 days a week there. It had a soccer field, so my son was playing soccer on a soccer team with the local kids there. It had a water park with a water slide. It had a restaurant. It had a bounce park where my son started to learn how to do backflips, which maybe turned into him being a freestyle skier and doing backflips now. Like looking back on it, the fact that they could my daughter could walk herself to dance class, and I could walk my son to bounce tramp, and it just looking back, it was, and we learned how to homeschool them, and they got to pursue some of their passions too. It just turned out to be a phenomenal life experience, I think, for everybody.
That's so cool.
So it is amazing what you can do in a short amount of time with the right intention, and we ended up putting our house on Airbnb, fully rented the whole house out. And we did have some support. We had at the time I had like an executive assistant. So she did do a lot of stuff to help us organize our house here and organize our activities down there. We did have a full-time nanny that we had hired to come to work with us in Canada. So she ended up having to turn around and join us in Bali. So we did have a lot of support that made things easier to do in that short amount of time. But yeah, and it turned out to be a great thing. Like the cost of renting our house here, I think we netted out positively in terms of what the cash flow was, being able to rent here versus living over there too. So it turned out to be financially a great thing.
You made money
a ton, but we made a little bit of money.
Travel. That's great.
We had a great experience as a family that all of us will remember. Even my 1-year-old, she still remembers the name of one of the friends she had there that she went to on play dates with our nanny. Like, I don't know, everyone found friends there, like local friends too. Like my son had 2 boys that grew up in Bali too that he made friends with. Like, it was just really cool to see what everyone was capable of doing, moving somewhere else and figuring life out and making friends and finding things they love to do. And yeah, I just overall, I'm so glad we did that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What else is on your list? What else you got?
You're next. Here you go. I don't want to.
Okay. So mine's not as grand maybe as that one, but it just happened, and it was just very close to home. We were in Whistler, which is an hour and a half. I mean, you do the trip there 4 times a week. It seems 5 times a week.
3 times, 6 times a week.
Oh my God! And we were just there over December, and when we went, it got crazy amounts of snow. It was nuts up in Whistler, and so we were staying in the lower village right near where like the Olympic Square, and so there's lots of like really cool remnants of the Olympics when the Olympics were here in 2010, and so we were staying down there, and we went to this thing called I think it was called Vallea Lumina. I think is what it's called. So you drive out about 20 minutes outside of Whistler, and it's like in the forest. You go up to this little dirt road, and there's like a big arch and over the road, and it says Vallea Lumina, and it's like a big light show, a light kind of hologram show in the forest with lights and music, and it's amazing. It's just nuts. And like you're walking through this forest down this path, and then like there's projectors projecting these like images on the trees, like it looked like the trees were talking, and like these faces on the trees, and then they have these. I figured it out afterwards, but they have these giant like almost like nets that are hanging from the trees, and they project onto these nets, and so it looks like a hologram, like it looks like a 3D image.
3D, right? Right.
And so the story is like the story of this gentleman and his granddaughter that go on a hike, and they go on this little adventure through the forest. And yeah, it's kind of their story, but it's just amazing. Like the dreamscape that it creates was really cool. And we had gone before when my oldest one she would have been 4, something like that. And my youngest one would have been, she'd been not even a year old. Or maybe it was before my daughter was born. Actually, it was right before my daughter was born. So my older one, she would have been 3. And my wife was pregnant with our second. And so, but we went this time, and it was about 45 minutes to walk through, and it was so fun to take my kids because now they'll both remember it. Like my older one's 8 and younger one's 5, and so they can both walk through it, and they had this great experience. But the coolest thing to me, and what stuck out to me, especially knowing like when I look back, like I can remember things when I was 5. Like I'm 47 now, I still remember a handful of things. Things will pop up in my memory, like, oh yeah, like I remember that. Like I remember some kind of like little moments when I was a kid. These are like special little moments. And my older one, as we were walking back up this set of stairs back up to like the main little village where they had like a little restaurant or a little cafe where you can buy hot chocolate and cider and marshmallows, and they had a bunch of fires, like these outdoor fire pits set up with these Adirondack chairs all around the fires. So even though it was like really cold outside, they kind of had it warmed up so you can kind of go sit and by the fire. It's just really beautiful area. And as we're walking back up the stairs, my older one, I looked down at her, I said, hey, wasn't that amazing? That was so cool. And she looks up at me, she says, yeah, what a great memory we just made for our family.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh wow. Like just that's the feeling she had, was like, we just created this really cool memory. And I was like, wow, like that was awesome. And it reminded me in the moment to, we weren't far away from home. It wasn't like we were doing something that was monumental, but
Sure.
We were all together, we were present. And yeah, to her, like we just created this awesome memory. Like we did this special thing. We took time out, we took time out of our lives to be together, to do something fun together, to connect and have a fun experience. Yeah, it created a memory. Like, oh, what a fun memory we just created for our family. I was like, oh, that was just so special.
Inside Out, like a new core memory.
Exactly, yeah, like Inside Out, yeah.
Well, that's some fantastic awareness for her to be able to like take a step out, like to be not just in the memory, but then take a step out of it and realize that was a great memory that she's going to have. Like that's some amazing awareness.
Yeah, and whether she does it or not, I mean, it definitely will for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I can't believe, I've been up to Whistler like 100 times. I never knew that existed up there.
I'll send you some stuff about it. It's so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah. I'll have to on one of these weekends that I'll be up there take my youngest through that too. That's cool, man. And what I was thinking as you're sharing that, like, it doesn't need to be this huge trip over to the other side of the world too, right? Like, I was just thinking about that whole experience in Bali. We could have recreated that here in some other part of the city if we just put our house up for rent, or rented a place somewhere else. Just get yourself out of life a little bit. We could have done this out in like, I don't know, Chilliwack or something, where we could have moved to a different place, been open to meet new people, tried out new food, take the kids out of school. You could disrupt life and have a whole new experience without having to go to the other side of the world too.
Yeah, I mean, it's talk about core memory too. As we're talking about this, I'm remembering when I must have been 10 or 11, maybe 12 years old. So I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, so like right in the center of Canada. I mean, granted, the south of Canada, but like right in the east to west, kind of right in the center. And it is so cold there. And just to get to Minneapolis, Minneapolis was like a 7-hour drive south. If you drive 7 hours south from Winnipeg, you get to Minneapolis, which is a cold place to be also. People do not consider Minneapolis to be very tropical. But we used to drive down to, Fargo, North Dakota was one. Grand Forks, North Dakota was another, to go like shopping when I was a kid, because the US dollar and the Canadian dollar were pretty close to that parity, but stuff in the States was way cheaper. So we'd go down there at like on spring breaks and, before school to go do a bunch of shopping. And so we had planned to go down to Minneapolis because that was a big trip, go down to Minneapolis for one of the spring breaks. And so we get in the van. I don't remember the details of it at all, like how this all transpired, but they got down to Minneapolis and it was so cold that my parents decided, like, you know what if we just kept driving? What if we just kept driving south? And so if you drive just almost due south from Winnipeg, as far as you can go, you get down to a place called Galveston, Texas. So Galveston is this.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So you get down to, so you're right on the Gulf of Mexico. And so they just kept driving and they're like, and so we drove down to Galveston, Texas. I don't know if they had brought it or if we got it. I think we kind of got it on the way. They bought like a tent and we were driving in a minivan. It was like, I remember it was like one of the Chrysler minivans, like one of the OG minivans. And we, as kids, we all slept in the van and we had this tent that we we parked on the beach. We slept on the beach, or not in the tent and in the van, on the beach. And we had this I remember seeing jellyfish on the beach and getting stung by something, a little something, not dangerous, but stung by something when I was wading in the water in the ocean. And we were there, I think just for a few days, maybe 2 or 3 days, if that. I don't actually even remember, but I just remember my parents all right, we're just gonna keep driving. It's wow. I can't imagine. Back then, I mean, my parents would have been in their early 30s and they would have had 4 kids. It's holy shit.
Holy cow.
Just the call to adventure.
I love that though. That's really cool. We still need to have our dads on here. I just love the spontaneity of them being willing to do that. I could see myself doing that now. But I think that's really cool for kids to be able to experience too, right? Where, you don't have to have it all planned out. You don't have to have it all thought out. And together as a family, we'll figure this out.
Yeah.
And we'll make it fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sticks.
It's so cool.
You have a memory of that now. Yeah. And you probably have a memory of okay, yeah, I don't have to have it all thought out. I can figure this out as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know. Most people I've ever met have no idea. They've never heard of Galveston, Texas. It's when I think of Texas, I don't think of Austin. I don't think of Dallas. Yeah. I don't think of Houston. I think of Galveston all the time.
But that's also Texas is so far, you've crossed the entire United States from Canada.
Yeah.
South. Yeah, that's a long, that's probably a 2-day drive, right?
I don't know how long it would have taken, but it was nuts.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've had visions of that. I haven't tented very much with my kids, other than in the back deck, in the backyard, back half of our house here. So we've done that, but I do have visions of being able to do it with them at some point here. So I would like to just do it, get set up, and then just hit the road with the right gear, and then just see where it takes you.
Well, now you got this cool pickup truck that you just got, so.
Well, I have visions of sticking those tents on the truck on the back, that you can just prop up at any time, so you don't have to get out and put it on the ground. That's my vision now, is having one of those tents that's permanently sitting on top, and just load the bed, get in the truck, full tank of gas, which can go 1,000 kilometers. You can go a long way, and then just go. And then where you need to stop, pull open the tent, get in there. You got everything you need. Yeah, that thing is like an RV now. It's got, I can work in it. got tons of room. It doesn't have a toilet, but it's man, this thing's gonna be able to go everywhere.
It's got a window, so it's a toilet.
Sure, you just gotta go outside. I mean, we don't need, what do you need? You don't need to be able to just go outside, get some leaves. We could bring toilet paper. Anyways, it'll be fun. Yeah.
Awesome. You got any more before we wrap up? You want to give us another one?
Well, the next one on the top of the list here, there's been some amazing ones. There's, we took the kids to with my former business partner. We went to China and visited some business partners there, so that we got to do the Great Wall of China and just experience China. Was really amazing. Beijing, I mean, China's very large, We experienced a very small percentage of it through Beijing, but that was just a phenomenal experience. I think my kids still remember just like how dusty and kind of like because there's not many trees left there. And same without sort of the outskirts of Beijing, a lot of factories and stuff. You just get these dust storms now that roll in, and it's kind of like the Lorax. You know what happens when you cut down all the trees. So I
Hmm.
remember that and like how sort of dark the sun was because of all this, the pollution and the dust and stuff. But there was
Oh
that part
wow.
of it. But the rest of it was also really cool, just being in a big city there and touring it around, going and seeing the Great Wall. Anyways, there were some really cool parts to it. Then going to Vietnam, that was amazing as a family, and going to see this rural village outside of Hanoi, town called Bac Giang, where some of the developers lived that made the video games in my last company, and being able, I think we were the only outsiders that had ever gone into this village, like very rural, like cows walking down the street and no cars and
Mm.
rice fields and stuff like that. So that was a phenomenal experience to stay there, and we stayed just outside that rural part of Bakchang. Like there is a city with some hotels and stuff, so we stayed there and just stayed with the locals and ate with the locals, and just I love meeting people that live there and living the way they live. Like just going to the where they go and their local places. I don't want to go to the touristy places that are set up for foreigners, right? Because you're not really getting the full experience of it. So
Mhm.
that trip's certainly way up on my list. And then the other one that's right at the top here was going back to Malta. So for my 40th, I hummed and hawed about this. I was like, oh, I'd really love to take my family back to Malta, and because I hadn't been there also in 25 years. No, sorry, 15 years, I guess, since I was 25. And so
Mhm.
I'd always dreamed of being able to take my family back and to meet, see where I lived and see how I lived, and some of the people I still had were friends with. So that trip also, we booked with a month to go with my 40th, and I was like, yeah, we gotta go. Let's do this. And so we booked a trip to stay for a month in Malta and visit the people and my favorite part of Malta is actually it's a small island. It's like 350 square kilometers, like population's like 300,000 people. It's one of the
Mm.
smallest countries in Europe, third smallest in Europe, I think. But there's an even smaller island, Gozo, that you've got to take like a 20-minute ferry to. And
Mhm.
on that island, it's much slower and kind of the old way it was. I don't think there was a McDonald's. Oh, yeah, there is now. There's not a lot of, westernization, and there's a lot of farming. Anyways, when I lived there, I met an amazing gentleman, a friend of mine, Steve, and he'd invite me every weekend to go stay with his family on Gozo. So I'd be able to get away from the bustle of the big island and go to the small island, stay with his family. They had a pool with these farmlands out sort of in the background. And we
Mm.
played baseball. So I'd go and play baseball there on one of these dusty fields in this small farming village. And so I was really happy to be able to take my family to go stay with him and his mom. His dad passed. But they have a big house now that she's renovated and turned it into an Airbnb. And it was just a beautiful experience. And they still remember it to be able to go there, stay with his family, go to church with them, live their life. Yeah, go experience some of these ruins that are thousands of years old there and give them a little taste of history there. Like Malta, the interesting thing about it, which burst my bubble, was just how much history is there because of all these superpowers that kind of transcended the island and conquered the island and had been there and left their footprint. There's thousands of years of some of the most significant events and sort of ruling superpowers in Europe that left a mark there that you can learn from. So,
Mm.
yeah. Anyways, that was one of my other favorite trips as a family, was to be able to just go live there and experience life like these locals did in this on Gozo.
Very cool. I love it. Yeah, I love that. Just the common theme seems to be like you've had some really cool experiences, and then you want to share that with your family.
Mm.
I like that. That's something that is ingrained in you. That's like you had this amazing joy, this amazing experience, and it's like I want to share this with you. I want you to see this. I want you to experience this too.
Yeah, that's like the whole theme of our podcast, right? Is like we have this amazing experience being dads, and we want to share it with more people, and hopefully, inspire them to be an even better dad, or think about something different, or do things completely different than we say. Hopefully, inspire them for something else, and share that with other people. And And then also, as we know, we're doing this for our grandkids too, to be able to listen to us and learn from us and go, those guys were nuts. We're doing it totally differently. Or, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Great granddad, I'm going to do it like that too.
Yeah. I love it. Awesome,
You
man.
got any more on the list, or you want to end it
Um,
up here? No, it's fine.
no, I think that's good.
Oh,
I think it's
okay.
that will and on that. I think it's awesome. Because if I have a couple stories, but they'd just be we'd likely go on to 10 tangents as we're telling the story. So I'll save it for another day.
All right. I had one more too, like yours, but I don't have to do it. Just the road trips though, as a family. We did a minivan once too and drove to Regina.
Mm.
And just the stops along the way, the parts of the country you don't normally see. I just think road trips are really cool too, like you'd shared there with your family.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
Good.
these little kind of not forgotten places, but these places that most people have no idea about. It's like there's a place between Kelowna, or I guess no, between Summerland and Peachland along on Lake Okanagan. It's like
Hmm.
the middle. So there's like the road, one of the main highways goes like along the lake,
Yeah.
and so that's how you kind of get to. I think it's Peachland, but like in the middle where there's just road so there's a lake on one side. Every so often there's like a little rest stop area where people park and get into the lake, but it's just kind of like hill on one side, lake on the other side. And all of a sudden there's a big parking lot in this little building, and there's a Chinese restaurant.
Oh yeah.
It's like
I
in
know
the middle,
exactly what
it's
you're
like
talking about.
seemingly in the middle of nowhere. And this place
Yeah.
is busy all the time when it's open, but like it's not open all the time. Like so many
Yeah.
times we've driven by and it's like there's nobody there, and they're
Yeah.
not open. And it's like, what is it? This is so, it's fat. I'm fascinated by this little Chinese restaurant that's just seemingly in the middle of nowhere.
It's got a
And
beautiful view, right? It's like the only place on this sort of like a little point on the lake out in front of them, right? And the
yeah,
mountains above it. Beautiful spot. I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, it's fascinating. I'm just always fascinated. I've actually never been. I've actually want to go this summer. I want to go to this little Chinese restaurant. I love Chinese
Random
food. So
Chinese restaurant in the middle of Peachland in the Okanagan.
yeah, and I'm always fascinated with those little things, like how did those people get there? Like let's say because
Yeah.
there's a lot of these little places I see, especially with like these little towns especially Canada is so big, it's so vast. You see these little towns, you see these immigrants from China, from India, from Pakistan, like from everywhere. And it's like, how did you get here? I'm always so
Right.
curious about their story. Like, how did you, and of all the places in the world, like, how did you end up in Peachland, BC? Like, how did
Sure.
you end up outside of Regina? How did you end up in Saint Pierre, Manitoba, this little town of like 300 people? Like, how did you get there? It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
But and just we won't go too much on the tangent here, but just that's been so interesting about learning people's stories about how they got here. Like I've been doing this work with the Japanese community here in Canada, and like they got spread out all over the place because of the war, and then forced internment, and then forced. It's called the second displacement. So the Japanese got split up and sent all over the country. So then, but just any immigrant that came here, like, well, how did that Chinese family end up did their ancestors be part of the ones that were building the roads and the tunnels and ended up
Hmm.
staying there, survived all that and ended up staying there? Like, I just think anyone's story in your own, and this is the part that I'm going to go on a bit of a rant. This part of the book Essentialism that I read last year that really inspired me to want to learn more about my own story. He had a question about
Mm.
like, do you know your grandmother's maiden name? Do you know your great grandparents' first names? Like, how much do you know about your own story, and where your own tribe came from that's a part of you? Because the more I've started to learn about my own history, my own lineage, and my own family, it's been like, oh my God, look at all these stories of like how that family got to Peachland. And like, I'm part of that family. That's super inspiring that they came with nothing and they set up this restaurant. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
I don't know. I think that's so interesting for our great grandkids that are watching this when they get older to go back in your history, learn about your grandparents, learn about your great grandparents, learn about your blood relatives that are part of you, and hopefully that can be really inspiring for you. And it also could be make sure you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that, but at least you get to learn some really cool stuff just within your own story and not have to learn it from textbooks or TV or whatever.
Yeah. Learn from my mistakes.
Yeah, learn Learn no matter what. Learn what you did like about what you hear, and learn about what you didn't, and choose to make your own adventure.
Yeah, man. Awesome.
All right.
Cool. All right, man. Well, we'll open loop it so you guys will tell some more stories next week. Tune in.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, brother. Thanks,
All right,
guys.
see you, man.